If your data capture every response, that is one thing. If your data samples moments or intervals, that is something else. That difference matters. C5 is asking you to distinguish continuous and discontinuous measurement procedures. Continuous measurement detects all instances of the target behavior during the observation period. Discontinuous measurement is any form of measurement in which some instances of the response class of interest may not be detected. In plain language, continuous measurement tries to capture every occurrence during the observation period. Discontinuous measurement samples behavior so it may miss some behavior that actually happened. Cooper describes behavior as dynamic and continuous because it occurs and changes over time. Because of that, continuous measurement is described as the gold standard in behavior analysis research and practice. On the exam, listen for whether the observer records every instance or uses intervals, moments, or samples. Continuous measurement is not one single form. It refers to measurement that detects all instances of the target behavior during the observation period. Event recording includes procedures for detecting and recording the number of times a behavior of interest is observed. Timing procedures are used to measure duration, response latency, and inner response time. Duration measures the amount of time from the onset to the endpoint of a behavior. Response latency measures the elapsed time between the onset of a stimulus and the initiation of a later response. Inter-response time, or IRT, measures the time between two consecutive instances of a response class. So when you see count, rate, duration, latency, or inter-response time, IRT, collected across the observation period, think continuous measurement of all relevant instances are being detected. Although continuous measurement is the gold standard, it is not always feasible in applied settings. Continuous measurement may be prohibited by the nature of the target behavior being measured. It may also be limited by the number of participants or clients whose behavior must be measured. The number, duration, and scheduling of observation periods can also make continuous measurement difficult. The availability of trained personnel can also limit whether continuous measurement is possible. In those situations, applied behavior analysts often use discontinuous measurement methods. The three primary discontinuous methods described are partial interval recording, whole interval recording, and momentary time sampling. The exam move is continuous is more complete, but discontinuous may be used when resources or logistics make continuous measurement impractical. Time sampling refers to methods for observing and recording behavior during intervals or at specific moments in time. The basic procedure is to divide the observation period into time intervals and then record the presence or absence of the behavior within or at the end of each interval. Applied behavior analysts use three forms of time sampling: whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. Whole interval recording asks whether the behavior occurred throughout the whole interval. Partial interval recording asks whether the behavior occurred at any point during the interval. Momentary time sampling asks whether the behavior is occurring at the specific moment the interval ends. On the exam, the words throughout, at any point, and exact moment are the big clues. Whole interval recording is often used to measure continuous behaviors such as cooperative play. It can also be used for behaviors that occur at such high rates that observers have difficulty distinguishing one response from another, but can still detect whether behavior is occurring. In whole interval recording, the observation period is divided into brief time intervals. At the end of each interval, the observer records whether the target behavior occurred throughout the entire interval. Data from whole interval recording are usually reported as the percentage of total intervals in which the target behavior was recorded as occurring. Whole interval data usually underestimate the overall percentage of the observation period in which the behavior actually occurred. The longer the intervals, the greater the degree to which whole interval recording may underestimate actual occurrence. Exam clue: if the behavior has to happen for the entire interval, it is whole interval recording. In partial interval recording, the observer records whether the behavior occurred at any time during the interval. Partial interval recording is not concerned with how many times the behavior occurred during the interval or how long the behavior was present. If target behavior occurs multiple times during the interval is still scored as occurring only once. If a student is disruptive for only 1 second of a 6 second interval, that interval would still be scored as disruptive behavior. Because of that rule, partial interval recording often overestimates the overall percentage of the observation period that the behavior actually occurred. Partial interval data are usually reported as a percentage of total intervals in which the target behavior was scored. Partial interval recording can also underestimate the rate of high count behavior because one response and 8 responses in the same interval are both scored in the same way. Example clue: if any occurrence during the interval counts, it is partial interval recording. In momentary time sampling, the observer records whether the target behavior occurred at the moment the time interval ends. With 1 minute intervals, the observer looks at the person at the 1 minute mark and immediately records whether the target behavior is occurring. The data are typically reported as percentages of total intervals in which the behavior occurred. Momentary time sampling is used to estimate the proportion of the total observation period that the behavior occurred. A major advantage is that the observer does not have to attend continuously to measurement. A major limitation is that much behavior can be missed because the person is observed only for a brief moment. Momentary time sampling is used primarily to measure continuous activity, behaviors such as engagement with task or activity. It is not recommended for low count, short duration behaviors. Example, if the observer only checks at the exact end of the interval, it is momentary time sampling. Planned activity check or play check is a variation of momentary time sampling. In play check, the observer records whether each individual in a group is engaged in the target behavior. The procedure uses head counts to measure group behavior. A teacher using play check observes a group of students at the end of each time interval. The teacher counts the number of students engaged in the targeted activity and records that tally with the total number of students in the group. Playcheck data can be reported as percentages of children participating in activities. The text also describes playcheck type systems that use group momentary time sampling snapshots in school and community play environments. On the exam, if the observer scans a group at a specific moment and counts who is engaged, think play check. A measurement artifact is something that appears to exist because of the way it is measured. Discontinuous measurement can create artifacts because the data may reflect the measurement system rather than an accurate portrayal of behavioral events. In Cooper, figure 4.8 compares the same behavior measured by continuous duration recording, whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. Continuous duration showed that the behavior occurred 55% of the observation period. Whole interval recording produced 30%, which underestimated actual occurrence. Partial interval recording produced 70%, which overestimated actual occurrence. Momentary time sampling produced 50% in that sample, which was fairly close to continuous duration, but the text warns that different behavior distributions can produce different outcomes. Exam takeaway: discontinuous data can be collected accurately and still give a misleading picture because of the measurement method. Here's the final C5 sorting rule. Continuous data measurement detects all instances of the target behavior during the observation period. Discontinuous measurement may miss some instances of the response class of interest. Whole interval recording scores behavior only when it occurs throughout the entire interval. Partial interval recording scores behavior when it occurs at any point during the interval. Momentary time sampling scores behavior if it is occurring at the specific moment the interval ends. Playcheck is a group version of momentary time sampling. Ideally, all occurrences of the behavior of interest should be recorded. When continuous measurement is not possible, Cooper says it is generally preferable to sample many brief observation intervals evenly distributed throughout the session rather than using longer, less frequent intervals. Let's recap. Continuous measurement detects all instances of the target behavior during the observation period, while discontinuous measurement may miss some instances because it samples intervals or moments. For C5, remember the discontinuous clues. Whole interval means throughout the interval. Partial interval means any point in the interval. Momentary time sampling means at the exact moment. And play check applies momentary time sampling to group behavior.